Hi, my name is Dale Berry, and this is the first or the prologue of a series of videos where I'm going to be going through human development, early childhood education, and the things that I've come across and ideas and theories that I have seen in the field of educating young children. First of all, I'd like to say that I'm the founder and owner of a small school in Japan, a small early childhood education center, and this video series is going to be mainly for the benefit of my staff here, my teaching staff here, and maybe for people in the industry here that are working in places that don't necessarily have professional development support in their place of employment. So my goals for this series are to give you a springboard, to show you that there are avenues you can go down to develop yourself professionally. There are whole aspects of human development and childhood development, the human condition that you can look at, linguistics, language itself, and as well as the English language, that you can use to make this not just a clock in, clock out job, but something where you can become proud of knowledge that you've achieved. It can open up whole areas for you to walk down, and avenues for you to walk down, and things that can make it not just a job but a profession. So I would like, in Japan, it's very much a case of the term English teacher or teacher is tainted by a large number of companies that believe that if you speak the language, you can teach it, and that you can be responsible for the first steps in a child's life just on the basis of your nationality or the language of birth that you have, or your personality, or even the color of your hair. So what I'd like to do is offer you a springboard, if you've not looked into this before, to look at some theories that are out there, look at my experience as someone who came here without the knowledge that I believe that you need in this profession, or at least need to have an interest in. And maybe you'll find a place to start your learning journey in becoming the type of educator you want to be. It's mainly, like I said, for me, to get out some knowledge that some things that I'm studying, some things that I'm reading, and some opinions that I have, and actually getting them out there and seeing how they sound, so I can make up my own mind on things. But also for the teachers that work for me, so they understand what they're getting into, and the type of environment that I'm looking for here. So first of all, I'll explain a little bit about myself. A big disclaimer: I was not educated in education. So I do not have a PhD in education. I do not have a master's. My higher education was completely in IT and business management. It was before I started teaching, it wasn't on my radar. So any opinions that I have here, anything that I say here, please don't take it as the gospel truth. This should be a learning journey for both of us, for all of us. And so to say that I am a psychologist or a professional psychologist or anything like that would not be the truth. I am very much a naive psychologist, a layman that has self-taught himself all the tools that he believes that he needs, and my journey continues. And the beauty of this field is that it will continue for many, many years with no real end to it, because I don't think you could ever be a complete guru on the subject, although there are many people that are very well educated in the subject. So my this first video is just an introduction to me, the reasons why I'm doing this video, or this series of videos, and just to get a few things out of the way to let you know what we're going to be doing. So first of all, I'm Dale Berry. I was brought up in East London / Essex to a working class family, very much working class. My father was a carpenter by trade, fitted windows, made his fortune fitting windows. And my mother was a hairdresser who later worked for the post office and works in hotels. So I was brought up in not such a bad part of East London or Essex, depending on who you are. But it was very much a thought of what you study. If you're going to study something, it needs to be something that gives you an immediate return. So it needs to be a trade or something you can make money from day one. So becoming a bricklayer or a carpenter, or getting business smarts, or something that you can actually tangibly use to change into money. So psychology, childhood development, education, things like that were not really on our radar. It was not something that was thought of as something that it was a gamble. It was like if I said, "Oh, I want to be an early childhood psychologist," my parents would have probably reacted the same way as if I'd have said, "I want to be a singer." It just didn't really fit with the circumstances of my childhood. So I'm mainly focused on IT and business management. But when I was about 14 years old, so my first experience of human development was, I want to say I was about 14 years old, but my mother gave me a book. And the story goes that my mother was in hospital, and next to her in the hospital was a lady, and she was the author of this book. And unfortunately, I don't have a name here at the moment, but the book was called The Anatomy of Intelligence. And when my mother came home, she gave me this book and said, "Oh, the author gave me a signed copy of it. I don't really get it, and would you like to have a look at it?" So I had a little look at it. And basically this book, The Anatomy of Intelligence, was a collection of studies, and it was a book trying to find how intelligence is achieved through childhood, from childhood backgrounds. So social standing was one of the things that it focused on, and it pulled from a variety of studies using thousands of families, and it was focusing on social standing, position within the family, so like first child, second child, middle child, and the twins. And it had some references to feral children, or children that did not experience any form of education until a later age. And it came to the conclusion that there was some barrier about the age of 4 or 5 where certain parts of the brain close down and you're no longer able to go beyond a certain point. And I read this I was just sucked into it. And something spoke to me about why people do what they do, why some people are more intelligent than others, and the conclusions of the book were few. It was you basically just looked at the numbers, looked at the studies, and you could see that you could say for nurture, you could say for nature. Especially some of the twin studies were rather interesting, but that was my first step, and from there I was hooked. And as I said, psychology wasn't really, or human development or any of those things weren't really something that I could give all my attention to. But I found myself, when I should have been studying on things that I should be studying on, and taking exams and things like that, I had my nose in books on psychology, on behavioral therapy, on body language, neurolinguistics programming, all things like that. There was a horrible book called The Game, which was popular for a while, I think later on when I was in my teens, when I was at college. It was a horrible chauvinistic book, but it was about manipulating people and basically manipulating women into having relations with you. But the idea of these people being, you could think of a system that would influence people, and according to this book, it worked. And just the whole idea of the way the mind works, the way people communicate, it enthralled me. But I started part-time, and I entered the security industry. So I entered into security, all forms of security, from briefly a uniformed guard to investigations, fraud investigation, credit card fraud, and eventually into management and then area management. And at that period of my life, it became, why did people do what they do? Because in that industry, I'd come across a lot of people that threw their life away, or would have a mentality where if they can get it for free, then it's their right and they're entitled to get it. And people from a lot of different backgrounds, and I had crazy experiences with the lowest, if you want to say it, forms, and also high forms of society doing, to me, incredible things. For example, there were people that had drug issues that were completely and utterly ruled by these drugs. And you'd see them when they were clean, or when they at least said they were clean. And you'd see them, you get to know these people sometimes, and they would come up to you and apologize to you and say, look, I'm getting my life back on track. And their hair was combed, they looked presentable, they didn't smell of anything. Funnily enough, when you work with heroin addicts for long enough, you can actually smell it in their sweat. But they would be just another human being. And then one person in particular I can remember, I had a conversation with, and 3 months later I saw her again, and she'd relapsed pretty terribly, and she behaved like an animal, spitting, biting. She had needles hidden on a person, and her teeth fell out eventually, and you just saw this degradation of this human being into something almost like an animal. And I was just, it shocked me so much that I just wanted to know why. What drives people to this? And is it something that was already decided when they were 4 years old? Or is it something that happened later? Or was it in their DNA? And another example would be someone that killed a man over a 16-pound CD from HMV. When I was in area management, it was one of the people that worked for our company. We were informed that he was stabbed in the back by someone who didn't want to get arrested for having a 16-pound CD. And so these things, they made me think about, what is the human condition? What is being human? What is being civilized? And how can you give people the best chance to not become like that? And so I continued studying, self-teaching on that aspect. So a lot of my childhood development side waned, and I focused mainly on behavioral therapy, on why people do what they do, and things along that line. And then when I was 23, I decided that I'd risen a bit too quickly in the security industry, and I wanted to do something more relevant for my age. So I decided to take a year out, and I said, I'll be back in a year. And I packed a couple of bags and came to Japan. Now, I'm not sure why I chose Japan. I believe a friend may have suggested it, or it was just high on the Google search results, but I saw that Japan, that's a completely foreign place. I'd love to be able to speak Japanese, and hopped on a plane and came here. Well, during that year, I met a lot of people from a lot of different countries. I lived in a hostel for about 6 months and met lots of people from different walks of life and different countries, from Europe, from Asia, from Africa, from all over the world. And I noticed that language became a big interest for me. So not only was I studying Japanese, I was also having to adjust my thick Essex Cockney accent to be able to converse with these people, and also the word choices that I had to use. Some words that we used in Essex, if you use them in the company of someone from, say, the United States, they may be offended by them or not understand them, and so I had to adjust my language. Now, always from school, I loved Sherlock Holmes, James Bond, those kind of figures, and even at school I used to try to elevate my vocabulary and try to speak proper. And I always thought wondered why people didn't speak properly. It was in my head, it was some lower form of the language, the dialects or the accents that we had in where I grew up. And so when I came here, it came almost naturally to me that I could be conscious of the words that I was using and communicate with all these different people from different walks of life. Well, I started by teaching English to adults, and that was so horrifically boring. And I really didn't like the job. But what I did enjoy was interacting with people from different countries and actually looking at the reasons why we say the words that we say, and the exploration of the English language, and also the cultures that are around the world. Because if you grow up in the east of London, you go to Spain, or you go to some resort once a year if your family has money, and you just basically see Little Britons abroad. That's what you see. So actually coming here where there's a mix of different cultures was fantastically interesting. But the job itself was a slog. It was horrible. It was not rewarding. And I was soon looking for a different type of career. Well, it just so happened that a position came up in an international preschool, which was a full-time kindergarten for children, for Japanese children, whose parents wanted them to become bilingual. And so they would come to this school Monday to Friday, 9 till 2, and they would have a lead teacher who was from a native speaking country. And the expectation was that they would become bilingual because they would be spending 5 hours a day in the classroom with a native speaker. Now, unfortunately, not many people go into studying education, studying early childhood development, and then decide to pack their bags and go to Japan and teach. That's quite rare. And so what happens is most people, it's people on a working holiday visa, people who have never taught in their life, but if you have blonde hair, blue eyes, and speak English like a native, then you have a job. And I started working in this place, and my first day, I was given a basket which had some flashcards and things in it, and I was put into this room with 16 1 to 2 year olds. And my experience of children up until that point had been holding them at arm's length and not knowing what this little wriggly, wailing, noisy thing was and what to do with it at all. So I walked in the room thinking, I'm going to teach English. They're going to pick up this red fruit and put it on the red card. Almost with an idea of being like the scientist teaching the chimp. And when I walked in there, I realized that half of the children were bawling their eyes out and screaming, and the other half of the children were wandering off doing their own thing, just wandering around. And me sitting there with my basket and my flashcards, I had no idea what to do with them. And I felt this huge pressure of like, I don't know what to do. This requires so much more knowledge to be able to do this. And I was almost in tears on my first day, sitting in the middle of 16 screaming children. Well, that was a short position. And after that, I worked for the same company, but going to Japanese kindergartens around Japan. And what I would do would be, I'd have my basket again with all my different things, and I'd walk into a classroom of 40 kindergarten children and then shout, "Good morning," in a big voice with a Japanese translator next to me or a handler. And I would do these performances. And they were 20-minute performances that I'd do maybe 6 or 8 at a time, one after the other, running around this kindergarten teaching English. And one thing I realized in my time doing that was that having this entertainer persona, this performer, you could go in there and you could absolutely have 100% of their attention on you for that time you were in there. For those 20 minutes, they wanted to do anything to please you. And you could use that yearning to please to be able to teach the knowledge, teach the words that your bosses wanted you to teach. So it's basic vocabulary, animals, fruits, months, days, numbers, all the basic things that come to mind. But it was exhausting, but it was great fun because you were almost a rock star in these kindergartens. But you would only ever see these children once a week, sometimes once a month. And so the progression was very slow, but the reward when they could say their name, they could ask a friend their name, they could answer questions, they could use basic sentences. It was amazing to see that what you had done actually had this effect on these children, and I wanted more of it. So I started trying to rise up and find a way to get more of this reward that I wanted. So a position, as it happened, a position opened up again in this full-time kindergarten, but this time for the slightly older age range. And I got the job. And this was 5 hours a day. I'd have the same children every single day for the year, and I would be their homeroom teacher, their teacher. And that was my introduction. That was my first steps in early childhood education. And so from there, I got to know these children. I forged a relationship with them, and I learned bit by bit what they responded to, what their needs were, what the best ways were of getting them to speak English at the beginning, because the whole focus was on speaking English. Nothing else matters. And eventually I started to think, well, these children need more than this. If this is their only form of education, then they'll need physical education. They need all sorts of things. And so I started to look for, I thought maybe it was that school I was in and that other schools might not be the same. And so I went to, after that I went to a Japanese kindergarten where I was the English teacher in this Japanese kindergarten. It was my responsibility to bring up the English of the children in all the different years. And I found that was also a bit lacking. What I could do was limited, and I decided to go to another preschool, which is another one of these international schools, where I got my own classes, and I found that it was the same thing again. It was all about English, reading, writing, speaking. That's all they wanted to know. And I then went to a large international school which had 320 children between the ages of 3 and 6, and I was an assistant teacher in that school. So that school had one Japanese professional teacher and one foreign teacher that spoke English, and you would share the responsibility of the class. And I saw how the teachers were. I was lucky enough that this was a private school and all the teachers were absolute pros, and I got to see how a real school operates, with a big hall, a sports gym, with its own syllabus and curriculum, with targets laid out, with teachers that would stay until 9 p.m. at night just to make a nice little display for the children when they come in, so that there's something new for them to see, and how to and thinking about these children and how they need to be developed, and how to like thinking about moving them from one place to another, and cutting it down into steps and actually making it so the children could understand. And that was a wonderful experience for me. The money was terrible and the hours were long, but professionally it was fantastic because it opened my eyes to that side of it. And so from there I decided I want to open my own school. So I went from that large school to a very small school to see how they ran. And again, it was the same system of English being first, English first, everything else is secondary. But I could use it to stretch my legs and try to add a bit more of a rounded curriculum in it. And I happened to work with someone that was a certified teacher in the States, and introduced me to a whole range of different schools of thought when it came to early education. I'd already looked into Montessori, Reggio Emilia, and the main schools of thought when it came to teaching children. But this person that I worked with, they really helped me deep dive into some of these things. And after that is when I eventually started to open my own school. And I converted an old sushi restaurant into a kindergarten. And when it came to trying to think about what curriculum to use, how to base the what to do with the school, I then had to try and figure out a curriculum, a syllabus. And for one person or a group of people to come up with a complete syllabus and a complete method of teaching, you have to have an ego the size of Britain, or you have to have be an absolute genius, because every child is different and every child is an individual in their own right. And so this experience, I've charged through it a bit, but during this time, my psychology and human development, that side of me, it all came back, and I was nosing books again. And you'll notice that at no point here have I said during training or this, there was no training. Everything was self-taught, and I'm a lucky individual in the fact that I can absorb information from other people. I can imitate other people. I can see what they're doing and steal little bits of their personality and use it in my toolkit for my children. And I can also hyper-focus on a subject and absorb a lot of information quite quickly. So I was lucky that I already knew that I could just hammer at it and become a better teacher. That paired with the fear of failure. So I self-taught myself. Everything was self-taught or stolen from other people. And so that brings us to my current position. I've had this school open for 4 years. We eventually decided on using the UK's EYFS framework, plus the characteristics of effective learning or development matters, and in the moment planning. And I've stolen ideas from other places where thousands of teachers are using this curriculum, and it seemed to fit my thoughts and my ideals. But yeah, so that is an outline of me. So remember, I am self-taught completely. I am not a doctor so-and-so from so-and-so university. I am someone who's learning all the time, and I invite you to learn with me. And I'm going to be going through things, and sometimes my thoughts will change, and I hope that you will disagree and have your own opinions and go down your own lines of thought. I'm going to try and make this as general as possible. Some things I will skip over quite quickly. Some things I will delve into quite heavily because it resonates with me personally. But as a basis for this, as something to use as an outline, I'm going to be using, it's one of the great courses, which are audio-based courses that you can do from university professors. And it's a fantastic course by Professor Malcolm W. Watson, who's a professor at Brandeis University. And the course is called Theories of Human Development. And so I'm going to be using that as a framework, and I'm going to be jumping off on tangents. Now, this is a very rambly video. So I hope to keep all the videos around 30 minutes long. I'm going to be using the course that I just mentioned as a framework, and then taking from my own experience in the classroom and from what I've learned myself, and adding to it, and just giving you an idea of the different people, the different theories, and the different things that are out there when it comes to human development and early childhood education, psychology, and human behavior. And then, so from that, you might see something that you think, oh, I'd like to know a bit more about that. And you can then look for yourself and go down the route that you want to be. Maybe you want to be more focused on educating adults, educating yourself, understanding why you do things, understanding why others do things. But this, I believe, is a subject that's so transferable that it can be useful for anyone. So one thing I will say is that I am highly sensitive to trolls on the internet. So you might find that the comments are disabled on these videos. If I find that the comments are getting toxic, or they're causing me anxiety and things like that, I'm not doing this as a money venture. This is purely for my staff and for me. But I want to put it out in the world too for anyone else that might find it interesting. So I might disable comments on there if I find that it's hindering what I'm trying to do with these videos. But please give a comment if there's something productive that you want to say. Like, for example, please look up this, or what are your thoughts on this, or I don't agree with this particular bit, I don't agree with you here. But please remain civil to each other, and please to me. I don't often venture onto the internet for things and expose myself like this, so I'm hoping that I'll be received well. But so from now on, the videos will be a little bit more structured, and but maybe with a bit of rambling and going off on tangents from time to time. But again, I'll try to keep them down to 30 minutes. And this was basically an introduction as to what I'm trying to do, and to explain the fact that I am not professionally a higher education educated educator. So please enjoy it. I hope you find something useful. And if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments, or you can find me on the internet, I imagine. Well, thank you very much for getting through this video, and I hope we can all get something interesting out of it. Thank you very much.